The Boston Police Department is moving ahead toward a pilot program for body cameras in Boston and other cities. There have been calls for making police wear the cameras, especially for more transparency around the use of force. Our guest is one of the activists pushing for a camera program in Boston. We'd like to welcome the co-founder of the Boston Police Camera Action Team, Segun Idowu. Thank you very much for being with us, Segun.
Thank you for having me.
This has been taking a while, but it looks like as if there's been a bit of a breakthrough here, get a pilot program, even though it's voluntary.
Yes, so there, as you said, there's a breakthrough. Took a year almost to make it happen, but finally there is an announcement of a pilot program, and shockingly there was also a draft policy that came out through the Boston Globe as well when they announced the pilot.
Now this policy had things to say about who would wear the cameras, the rights of civilians, and access to the footage. Anything in particular you think is important about that?
Yes. So, almost a year ago as well, I was here talking about when Commissioner Evans announced that they were going to do a pilot. And at that time, we were cautiously optimistic, and we're the same this time. The policy is roughly 60% of what's in our policy, but what's missing are the important pieces or things that we disagree with, like the officer having the ability to review camera footage before submitting a statement, which we feel will muddy the process. Things like consequences are not in the policy. In fact, the section about consequences is the shortest section of the policy. Everywhere else, they clearly define what they mean in the description of the section, but for consequences, they actually just say officers won't face consequences for minor infractions, but we don't know what those are.
You're going to have to explain this a little bit about officers reviewing footage, because reporters, sometimes we have devices too, and we review them, and sometimes it turns out it wasn't exactly the way we had it in our head. So right. Sometimes isn't it good to look at a device before you file a report?
Well, what we are concerned about is officers, and of course we aren't going to assume that every officer would do it, but what we are concerned about is an officer reviewing the footage and then tailoring their statement based on what we see. So, an officer, I think a great case would be what happened to Mr. Castile. The fact that, the officer who said that they pulled this person over because
he was the one who shot in Minnesota.
In Falcon Heights, yes. And so, the story originally was that they were pulled over for a broken taillight. Of course, this person announced over the radio that it was for a different reason, but I think had this person been able to view the footage before their statement, he probably would have tailored his story to match that of the footage as opposed to the reality of why Mr. Castile was pulled over. So we want to avoid instances of officers being able to cover themselves by using the footage and what we can or cannot see.
We're talking with Segun Idowu from the Boston Police Camera Action Team. What about making this voluntary? I know it's not what you want to see as a final program, but as a step towards something else, why not?
Well, every other city or community that has instituted a pilot program successfully has not done it voluntarily. I think the way we were told was, New York did a voluntary program. They had 50 officers out of thousands of officers to pilot this, and they wound up getting just 15 hours of footage because there was no policy, there were no consequences for if you turned them on or off. But then after they saw that this pilot didn't really yield any results, they voluntold officers that they should be a part of the program. And if this is something that can be public, we're fine with that as well. But, I think, being selective in who we put into the program as opposed to anyone who wants to sign up will, again, muddy the process. We will not get the results or we won't be able to accurately or adequately define if this program was successful, because maybe all of the officers who are community service officers sign up, and that's not what we're looking for in the cameras. We're not trying to spend all this money just to see if the technology works. What we want to make sure happens is that we prove what we've been saying for the last 2 years, that these create more accountability and transparency, and they begin to ease tensions between the community and the police force.
A lot of the encounters that involve the use of force have undercover officers. Is there a way you can wear a body camera and still be undercover?
No, one of the things we put in our policy is that undercover officers should not wear the cameras, because then they would no longer be undercover. Really a lot of these incidents happen in the gang and drug units as opposed to undercover officers, and they most definitely can wear body cameras. And honestly, when we were in talks with the police department about this pilot program early on, we suggested and very heavily supported the idea that if this pilot is to begin anywhere, that it begins in those two units as opposed to the local units that just cruise around the city.
We're talking with Segun Idowu from the Boston Police Camera Action Team. Talk about the ability to diminish or at least to reduce distrust. If you have cameras that show the encounters, what would be the best example of that?
Well, one thing that, or one complaint we hear a lot is that folks who have a negative encounter with officers go through the process that's at hand, which is going through internal affairs. And a lot of times, this particular department comes back with a negative review of what a citizen may have said happened. They may just say, well, you have no justification in this complaint, and therefore we'll toss it out. And the only other step that this person has is going to our version of a civilian review board, which is the Community Ombudsman Oversight Panel at City Hall, who they have no power. All they can do is submit recommendations that maybe the police department didn't handle this the correct way. But I think body cameras will create a third witness to an encounter, and it will support either side. I can't say that citizens will be proven correct with body cameras being around, but neither can I say that the officer's version will be upheld as well. But at least there will be some accountable presence there. There'll be an objective observer of the incident, and it can. I can't say that it will be the only tool that rebuilds trust, but it's at least a couple of steps forward in rebuilding lost trust, if there ever was trust to begin with, between at least my community and the police force.
What about public access to the videos?
Yeah, so the policy that that the police department submitted as a draft version kind of limits public access to the videos. I know our policy says that if you were the subject of the video, that you should have direct access to this footage. You don't have to go through the courts, you don't have to go through any other process except for filling out a form and saying that you've requested this particular footage. And I think that's how it should be. If I am the one that's recorded and I feel that I was not treated correctly, I should be able to review that evidence before either submitting a complaint or if I'm going to take this to civil court.
Well, one thing that has changed over the past year is, I think, the atmosphere around the videos, and we've also had a couple of officers, more than a couple actually, who've been shot by people. And the question now is, people are polarized about it. I mean, there's on one side we have people who want the transparency, and there are other people say that, oh, this is maybe the cause of the hysteria.
Well, I think that people who may say or take the latter argument haven't been paying much attention to history. I mean, in the African American community, these videos aren't showing us anything new. I mean, it's really just showing the rest of the country and the world what we already know has been happening. You don't have conversations. I was listening on the radio here and have heard through many panel discussions of African Americans and Hispanics who say that they have to have the talk with their children. That's not because of video. This was a talk that was happening well before the presence of video was possible. And so, no, I don't believe that this video is the cause of what's been happening. I think what's happened is that, at the end of the day, you start to see your own family or friends that are attacked, and some people decide to respond in kind. It's not a good decision. It's a terrible thing to do. But at the end of the day, I would not blame at all video footage for causing people to act violently towards violent acts that are happening towards them.
We should mention about the camera policy in Boston. There's going to be a hearing coming up pretty soon.
Yes. So Councilor Andrea Campbell, through her Committee on Criminal Justice and Public Safety, just very recently announced a hearing on August 4th, which is a Thursday, and it's going to be held at the Mildred Ave Community Center. Begins at 5:30 p.m. This time around, and so we're happy that that her committee has chosen to hold this hearing in the community at an evening hour, so all can attend.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Segun Idowu from the Boston Police Camera Action Team. In a moment, a program that helps save money on the cost of energy, but first, this message.